Artificial intelligence. Literally everyone ever is talking about it. It seems to be taking over our lives, both metaphorically and literally. Most of us have already come to terms with the fact that our days are numbered at our current jobs. But I mean, come on, you don't have to be that worried. AI isn't going to start making the chips at Chipotle. Okay, maybe it is. But even despite that, AI seems to be coming after creative jobs first. The main two that come to mind being art/image creation and music. But it seems like with art, people have been very quick to call out just how creepy and off-putting these images are. Most people look at these attempts at creativity and feel disturbed. Or horny. Listen, some people are they're down bad. Music has been very different though. People have been quick to put AI songs in their playlists right next to other human-made tracks, whether they know it or not. Listen, I don't just say that to scare you all. I'm just genuinely trying to figure out how close is AI to taking over music. All this recent discussion about AI music getting closer and closer to human music is really enough to get any rational thinking person in a schizophrenic panic, including me. I've spent the last few months researching every single case of AI music, new and old. But even at the very beginning of this process, I couldn't help but question, where did this disaster even start? I mean, maybe it's always been like this, and we're only panicking now because of Twitter fear-mongering or whatever. Anyone who's done any amount of research about the origins of AI or generative music knows that most people start by sending you all the way back to the 1950s or even earlier to the 1700s. And that's lame as hell. We don't have time to talk about Johann suspiciously close with his two uncles Bach over here, alright? It's fucking boring. We need to start with not even just computers, but actual AI mimicking human intelligence that's making music. That's why we're gonna first talk about a seemingly random, now untraceable company called JukeDeck from the year 2014. In 2014, a man named Ed Newton Rex was joined by ex-Google employee Patrick Stubbs to co-found the company JukeDeck. Ed had been working on an AI composition tool for years at that point, and so by 2015, only a year after Stubbs joined the company, they launched their flagship website, a platform that used a series of algorithms to generate royalty-free songs for personal or commercial use. By setting certain parameters that these algorithms could work off of, users could generate original and unique songs in a matter of roughly 20 seconds. It was targeted at people looking to source music for their videos, video games, or commercials. And luckily for them, this technology would prove to be very useful, as even with the $200 commercial use fee, it was a more cost-effective and time-efficient method than hiring and paying a real soundtrack or stock music composer. That's at least if you ask big companies like Coca-Cola, UK TV, the Natural History Museum of London, and Stubbs' ex-employer, Google, who all ended up using the service. Now, there's two important things to point out with the advent of this website into the music industry. Firstly, if you had doubted my dramatic and cynical question in the beginning of this video, I think by now the evidence should speak for itself. If you thought there was no way that AI could ever take over the music industry, well, here you go. Even as early as 2014, AI has been trying, and in this case succeeding, at taking jobs. And sure, it's not the job in music that we all hold closest to our hearts, but it's a matter of principle. If AI can replace these composers, then what's next? On multiple occasions on this channel, I have brought up a man named Kevin MacLeod, one of, if not the most famous, stock music composer, with classics such as Sneaky Snitch, Fluffing a Duck, or Monkeys Spinning Monkeys. I shudder at the thought that only a year after Mr. MacLeod started his reign over YouTube background music, a robot tried to replace him, and you should shudder at the same thought. And the second thing I need to do here is emphasize just how important the involvement of those massive corporations really is. Because while it is true that very few of us heard about JukeDeck and its intentions, the right people did hear about it. And not just that, but they liked it in concept and in execution. It let them save money and time, which will always be the most important thing to a big name like Coca-Cola. What's even crazier is that ByteDance, the same company that now owns TikTok, would go on to buy JukeDeck. These companies just can't get enough. But there was one particular company which especially loved their concept, and that was one of JukeDeck's customers, Google. Google Magenta, announced in 2016, part of what would make 2016 the biggest turning point for AI generative music. Google assembled a team of developers who, in their own words, wanted to develop algorithms that could learn to generate art and music, possibly creating compelling and artistic content on their own. This is the big tech company equivalent of asking for a friend. We're not a music company, but we're just gonna figure out how to replace musicians because you guys are interested in it. Sound good? In reality, they liked how accommodating JukeDeck was to their bottom line, but they saw room to monetize it. Instead of them saving money for their songs, they'll generate songs at no cost for other people to pay for and listen to. Comforting, to say the least. And here's the thing, they didn't even know how they were gonna do it yet. They just wanted to stir up hype in the community by announcing it. We'll talk a little bit more about Magenta and what they wanted to do a little later. For now, I want to introduce the next and most important piece of the context puzzle. What happened in 2016, which made it such a defining year. A team of developers in Luxembourg developed the first AI composer to be recognized by the SACEM, the official society of authors and musicians, in February of 2016. And while JukeDeck made its music with programmed algorithms that were looking at human-given parameters, Ava makes music from scratch with machine learning AI that gets its knowledge from a massive classical music dataset. This thing is pretty much the apprentice to Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven all combined, and it only gets smarter as it makes more music. It barely needs us humans at all. And remember, we're in 2016, almost a decade ago, and this is already sounding like a movie premise. But why exactly does this sound so terrifying? It's not like it was perfect software. No producers just quit their jobs because of Ava, and certainly not because of Google Magenta, which was still just a concept, and both still had an off button. Well, it's about intentions. Those decades of generative music I skipped over weren't notable because they were years and years of harmless research in creating tools. Yes, there were showcases of how those tools could be used, like the Iliac Suite from 1956, a 4-movement piece of string music made by a computer algorithm. However, for the most part, it was artists making tools for other artists. For example, the Continuator made in 2012 by a group of musicians. A tool to help performers learn to improvise better by continuing acoustic recordings after the artists have stopped playing. Even in the very same year that Ava was released, Synaptic Adaptive Verb was made, a tool which uses AI to help producers add reverb easier, a sometimes bloated task. However, Ava and Google Magenta show muddier intentions. It's inherently unnecessary to have a program write melodies or entire songs for a producer, because if you can, you don't need the producer, especially if you add in something like Adaptive Verb. Within a few minutes, you could have a complete song ready for streaming with little to no human interaction required. Not to mention, a top 5 in size tech company probably doesn't care about the human producers anyway. So, we're getting closer to figuring out where the metaphorical shit hit the fan, but we're not there yet. It seems as if the biggest change that happened during this time period was the big companies getting involved. The more money being injected into the space and the more drive to make it commercialized will put more eyes on it, and it will motivate the companies to push it even further. With some musical chairs of software engineers from one big company to another new one, it was possible someone could come in and get AI music to be put everywhere. Yeah, this is where we have to talk about OpenAI. Even years before ChatGPT or GPT-3, OpenAI had plans of making AI an everyday tool. In 2019, OpenAI released MuseNet, a tool similar to Ava, but obviously with improved technology. Using GPT-2, MuseNet could fuse together different genres or styles into a new up to 4-minute song. But it's not just limited to classical composers. While the range of instruments is still relatively small, MuseNet has access to dozens of artists and countless MIDI files worth of music. But the big difference here is again in the intentions. Except this time, OpenAI made it very clear what they were trying to do with this software. To quote them, MuseNet was not explicitly programmed with our understanding of music, but instead discovered patterns by learning to predict the next token or important data point in hundreds of thousands of MIDI files. They made this software solely for the advancement of AI. Much, much different than Google, who played it off like it was all for research purposes. It's slightly dystopian, if you ask me. And honestly, that might have a lot to do with the fact that OpenAI was founded by some of the most dystopian entrepreneurs of our current era. For example, one of the lead AI designers at Google, Ila Sutskever, former CTO of Stripe, Greg Brockman, Jessica Livingston, known for co-founding one of the biggest startups in the world, Y Combinator, and Elon, gosh dang it, friggin' Musk. Yeah, I didn't know that either. Here is where the issue of massive corporations getting involved becomes incredibly prevalent. Because yes, again, this wasn't really making headlines at the time. Most of us weren't really worrying about MuseNet. But it tipped off other companies, other important people in the tech world, that music is a market that can be capitalized on. And like OpenAI said, they don't know shit about music, but they sure do know how to make an efficient software, one that is possibly good enough to one day replace musicians. So we can finally say that we figured it out. This disaster started with big companies getting their grubby little paws on all the brand new AI advancements and planting the seeds to monetize it. And we all know what happens in between this plot point and where we are now. GPT-3 and ChatGPT become the biggest things since sliced bread, and AI becomes the hot new podcast topic. OpenAI would even announce Jukebox in 2020, only a year later, which is a brand new, even better version of MuseNet. So now, the general public wants to use AI, and they think all along it was their own personal discovery. Hey, look at this cool website, it writes my essays, that kind of shit. Meanwhile, this has been perfectly crafted together by the people who make all of the most mainstream stuff. AI music has exploded in popularity to the point where it has kind of broken this linear situation I was trying to follow, which kind of sucks. Like I said in the intro, there's a million companies, websites, and programs that use AI or are AI-driven, and don't think I'm exaggerating. Soundful, Sound Raw, Loudly, Udio, Music.fi, which is based off of a program which was already made, bought out, and shut down called Amper, Suno, Canva, Beethoven.ai, MusicFlow, Melodia, and so many more. And these are just the ones that make music based on the same format we've already talked about. Give it keywords or parameters and it'll spit something out. So if we're really gonna figure out how close AI is to taking over music, we're gonna have to ask questions that apply to all of these advancements, products, or services. And the first happens to be based on that list. Are these tools, or are they just a replacement? In 1787, okay, yeah, I know I promised I wouldn't talk about them, but just give me 1 second, okay? Amadeus Mozart created something called the dice game, a set of already written bars of music that could be randomly combined together using many rolls of a dice. He made it as a way to help his creative process. Centuries later, in the early 1970s, famous ambient artist Brian Eno would use oblique strategy cards to do a similar thing. The cards contained a singular word that he could then use to give him direction for what to write. He did this as a way to push himself out of his comfort zone and continue to innovate the ambient genre. Now, these are, on a technicality, cases of algorithmic/generative music, and these are prime examples of these methods being used as a tool. They are miles apart from the 22-year-old SoundCloud producer who makes simple and basic beats, who pays a few $100 to an AI studio software to make some more simple and basic melodies for him. Eno and Mozart came up with these strategies on their own. The algorithms were simple and only mostly random, but they knew the direction they would take them in. Also, there's the detail of there not being a massive AI takeover happening in the 1950s. Even if Eno had used full-blown machine learning, he wouldn't be contributing to a massive issue like he would have been now. In 2024, what at first seemed like a massive catalog of tools has turned into 500 tech startups that are trying to replace soundtrack composers, producers, or performers. Or trying to replace Spotify and Apple Music, because who needs to look for new music when you could just generate the perfect song? Or, shit, who needs writers when Suno can write you an entire song worth of lyrics about a topic of your choice? Even if that topic is actual shit. It's more than clear that AI is going in one direction and nowhere else. It wants to replace you and convince you it's for your own good. After all, it's way better than you at writing a song, no? It doesn't make mistakes. So, frick, man, we gotta give AI a point towards its takeover. But simultaneously, I can understand how this would be unrelatable. I am personally not a producer or composer, so I struggle to fully sympathize with the stress that future may bring. So here's the question: how does this affect the average listener? To some extent, we have no reason to care if artists are using AI as a tool for any aspect of their songs, as long as they're still making Brian Eno levels of innovative and unique music. Well, here is our second AI music dilemma. Can AI ever actually be creative? Can a robot ever capitalize on an imagination that it doesn't have? I think the easiest way to answer this question is to talk about one of these new AI music startups, Brain.fm. Brain.fm is the website I saw with the most consistent positive reviews. And that's from both optimistic to the point of Stockholm Syndrome to our AI overlords tech journalists to cynical Redditors. And this initially confused me. Essentially, Brain is an AI music platform intended to help you achieve desirable and otherwise difficult to maintain states of mind. Focused, relaxed, sleepy, among others. Now, while the idea of an AI whispering in my ear to drift me off to sleep scares the shit out of me, I can't say this isn't a pretty good idea for a service and a decently practical application for music. But also, let's face it, Suno and MuseNet are so popular because it's pretty much a massive spectacle. Cartoon villain level attempts at having AI take these massive swings at the music industry. People aren't really looking at them as a replacement for Spotify. Yet. Rather, some entertainment. But Brain over here is more realistic in the way it approaches using AI to make music. Its developers have accepted the fact that in order to keep public opinion and make a good quality service that people will actually use, human input and direction is needed. While these moods are still keywords, like most other music generators, this site appears to be more focused on a few, with the direct intention of making the music relaxing. It's not trying to make some creative statement piece. It's pretty simple to see the reason people like this service over most others. It is inherently more human in nature. It's not even trying to be creative because it knows it can't be. But it's probably because of that humbleness that it's not nearly as popular as Google, OpenAI, or Meta's attempts at generating AI music. When AI tries to be as creative as possible, people will talk about it, remark how close it gets to a human, but be quick to shut down its uses as a creative replacement. So, am I using this site to not so subtly prove my point that AI can't be creative? Well, yeah. But well, hold on, maybe I'm wrong. Let's boil it down to the most simple level. What does it even mean to be creative? According to the New Oxford Dictionary of English, something that is creative relates to or involves the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work. Okay, well, hear me out. All of these AI programs need at least some degree of human intervention. It could be to adjust things like tempo or time signature, give it an artist or style to replicate, or give it keywords to try and work off of. They all need a purpose, which goes against our definition of creativity. The reason making music isn't welding is because making a song isn't an algorithmic or linear process. Welding something, while uniquely challenging for its own variety of reasons, has a definitive start and end point. An idea for a song or a concept for an album gives no warning for when it will come or leave. Just like your dad. Listen, I'm sorry. But if we look back at our original definition again, imagination or original ideas don't have prerequisites. You can't tell a human what tempo or key signature their imagination has to be in. But I'll tell you what, you sure as shit will have to sit there begging that AI to try and replicate an imagination and come up with something new. Though, you may be thinking, humans replicate artists they're inspired by all the time, just like how an AI does. Wouldn't that make the human artist just as uncreative as the AI? But here's the thing. A human may say to themselves, I want to replicate a Bon Jovi song, and pursue that desire just like how an AI can. The human did it because they felt it would benefit them in some creative way. Even the thought process to land on Bon Jovi as an artist to study and replicate is creativity or an original idea to some degree. And it would take at least some creativity to make that music. Basically, what I'm saying is that the process is the purpose. And the only prerequisite or parameter was just the basic emotion of feeling inspired. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the internet, there's some tech executive with no passion or interest in music telling a few lines of code to make a Bon Jovi song like it's a dirty little AI startup brothel. So it isn't just me picking out the sites that prove my point. Fundamentally, these AIs cannot be creative, which does, in turn, affect the average listener. The reason this whole dilemma was brought up was because we thought it was irrelevant whether or not AI replaces producers or artists. But if we know AI cannot be creative, it definitely would become our problem too. If we let these AIs make all of our music, innovation and original ideas would become so scarce, the tangible quality of the music would go down. In other words, we would all just get bored. MuseNet needs new artists to add to its database. It needs new songs to add to its MIDI file collection. In fact, the rest of that list needs to expand its database in order to have a chance to ever make anything remotely innovative. But these big companies know this. They can jingle keys in front of our faces all day and make programs that replicate music we already like, but they know it isn't sustainable. At some point, they're gonna have to give their program at least the facade of creativity. And if you really think I'm pulling that out of my ass, I raise you this: Amazon's entry to this shit show, AWS Deep Composer, a service which advertises various features to help you learn to make music, as well as a, software to write music for you. This example is highly unique because Deep Composer's actions speak a lot louder than its corporate filtered words do. It doesn't use the same supervillain-esque language that OpenAI used, nor the same academic and compassionate yet still deceptive language that Google used. No. The way Deep Composer is set up and delivered is what says the most. On the software end, it's pretty much just like every other program that we've talked about today. But packaged with your brand new, highly intelligent AI composer is a 2.5 octave basic bitch MIDI keyboard to let you pretend that you're helping. Now, it would be nice to say that this is a sign of good intentions and finally put a point into the human column, but it's Amazon who released this, not MuseScore. I ask you, what intentions could there have been other than capitalizing on a market they saw their other tech giant buddies tap into? How many ways do I have to say this? These big companies don't care about creativity, whether AI is capable of it or not. In reality, I think me, you, and every Amazon executive knows that there are infinitely more productive, long-term, and efficient ways to learn to make music that don't involve sucking all of the brainstorming, persevering, and creativity out of the process, and don't involve giving money to the biggest company in the world that lets their employees piss in bottles. They made a service that gives the illusion of creativity. They did what Brain.fm did. They accepted that to make a good product, some human interaction is needed to feed the AI, but they made that interaction pointless, which is somehow even more offensive. Offensive, but also impractical. The reason Brian Eno and Mozart had to go to such great lengths to make music out of their comfort zone that was truly innovative is because creativity takes time. True genre-defining ideas sometimes take decades, and Amazon, the bookstore company, using AI to let you rush that process along isn't a good advancement in music production. It's a bad product. None of this matters, though. People will still buy it and swear by its effectiveness. Frankly, it doesn't matter whether or not AI can be creative. These big companies don't give a flying fuck either way. And why should they? Who's gonna stop them from just having their AI make songs just like all the other songs we already like? In the words of the great Kendrick Lamar, keep making me dance, waving my hand, and it won't be no threat. As long as these products and services continue to make music that people can add to their playlists, creativity or innovation isn't even in the conversation. People want results right away. They want to hear cool music that they made come from their speakers within a few days of starting. Creativity or original ideas or not. So this is yet again another point for AI. And this time it sucks, because here is where I thought I had them. AI might not be able to be creative, but that doesn't fucking matter because that's not a requirement to make a product that people will buy. Just whatever. Let's move on to our third AI music dilemma, because this one might make me feel a little better. Just how lazy are us humans? Again, these AI programs get their success really only from people caring about the music sounding good and not really about the future of music itself. But just how far does that go? I just quoted Kendrick, so it's only fair that we bring up Drake now. You guys remember that other AI Drake song? Hard on My Sleeve, the one featuring AI The Weeknd and AI Metro Boomin, ironically? The #1 comment that we all saw on it, besides saying how close it was to their real voices, was something along the lines of, "Damn, this shit is better than 90% of what Drake is putting out these days." Or, "If Drake just made this, people would actually listen to his albums." Which shows us something pretty interesting. Like I've already said, people will take the satisfaction from the kind of thing they already like over waiting patiently for something new or innovative. Which, don't get me wrong, especially in this case is totally fair. I'm not gonna sit on some music snob high horse and say that everyone should only listen to the critically acclaimed, genre-pushing shit. Think about this from the average fan's perspective. Drake has been in a serious creative rut as of recent, with his studio album releases getting shit on pretty much everywhere. So it's fair for something like this to stir up frustration in his fan base. With that said, his fans gravitated towards the song instead of pushing against it, despite the fact that if his fan base was more vocal against this kind of stuff, it would prevent people from letting AI have more control in the future. So not only are big companies willing to let music stagnate for a quick buck, listeners are at fault sometimes too. It's all about what is convenient versus what is correct. But it shows us something else as well. There's a pivotal detail here. Drake's team, they did not like this. They knew it's what people are missing from his new music, and they were intimidated. So they've consistently taken it down from every platform. And Drake, seeing that AI doesn't necessarily turn his fans away, now used it to diss Kendrick. And as I'm editing this video, AI has been used in this beef again, in what will go down as probably one of the funniest comebacks of all time. Metro Boomin actually did shut up and make some drums with his song BBL Drizzy, which samples an AI-made 70s-esque soul song made by comedian King Wallonius of the same name. So as this technology gets older, it seems it's more and more up to the artist's discretion to use AI wherever they see fit. A scary thought, in all honesty, and one we've all probably already had. Not being able to tell when it's the real Tom York, or the real Lil Baby, or shit, the real Dua Lipa. It all really depends on, to put it bluntly, how lazy our favorite artists are too. Some easy streams for your integrity as a creative. And when it's not about streams, it's about your weird anti-human agenda, I guess. Many of you who know who the artist Grimes is have probably been waiting to hear me talk about her recent, I guess we'll call them plans. I guess the place she saw it fitting to use AI was, quite literally everywhere? How much do you have to hate your job to willingly open the floodgates to people trying to replace you and everything you've made? But, sorry, I am jumping the gun a little bit. For those of you who don't know, Grimes, critically acclaimed electro-pop artist, has been very clear and open about her endorsement of people training AI with her voice, even going as far as to offer up raw MIDI files of her voice. And while most would expect the response from the wider music community to be mostly negative to this, she was touted as being boundary pushing and a guinea pig for a brighter future. I will avoid giving my own opinions on this situation because I think, based on the rest of this video, you can probably infer what they are. All I will say is that it's clear I am not exaggerating when I say that the possibility of artists using AI to further their career is a very real one. And it's not like these artists have to use AI or else they can't compete, because it can be used exclusively for good. For example, Randy Travis, a famous country artist who unfortunately suffered a stroke in 2013, which led him unable to release music other than trickled out releases from previous studio sessions. In 2024, though, his voice was recreated with AI to have one more release. His old writers and producers, as well as himself on guitar, would put together a track that is actually worth hearing and not just some shit out AI mess. And especially considering the circumstances, it's undeniable this is finally a point for the humans. Using AI to fill a void that needed to be filled, a now satisfying conclusion to an otherwise abruptly ended career. But this laziness isn't just limited to artists and listeners. Human producers are not always the good guys. So far, we've mostly talked about services which are front-to-back AI composers, which can make an entire melody or an entire song. But there's also software out there to mix and master your songs for you, a rather large part of a producer's job. And yeah, these companies are frustratingly anti-human, just like every other company we've talked about today. Profit is the #1 goal above everything else, even if that means simplifying a task which otherwise has depth and nuance. But a lot of these programs are endorsed by real human producers. It appears it's just too tempting to have a robot make songs for you, even if you only hand it off partway through. Which is ironic considering even the CEO of eMastered, one of the biggest AI mastering tools, says that, quote, a traditional mastering engineer will always be the ultimate option. But okay, we've looked at how lazy the listeners of music are, as well as how lazy some artists and producers may be as well. But what about these big companies? I mean, we gotta keep checking in on them. Well, they're the ones in the back alley trying to sell us this dirty fentanyl-laced music. In what is a really weird relationship, their unrelenting determination to make new AI technology that the artists and producers use is what's making us all lazy in the most dystopian way possible. The thought process has been the same for, at this point, centuries. If we can make the technology better, why stop? It's just plain and simple morbid curiosity. And for most of human existence, that mantra for advancement and progression has been mostly productive, if not necessary. And while I'm not gonna say that we as humans don't need to continue to advance, because we definitely do, maybe this Silicon Valley mentality doesn't belong everywhere. But I think Elon Musk knows that he probably shouldn't let AI make all of our music. In fact, I know he knows he shouldn't because he's quoted as saying it's the biggest threat to the human race. But I mean, he's just gotta find out if it can compete, right? I mean, if he doesn't, someone will. So for Google, Amazon, Meta, and OpenAI, it's less about laziness and more self-imposed ignorance. So, yeah, AI is currently wiping the floor with us. Morally, it's flawed, and the holes in its morals have been easily identifiable, to say the least. Like, I'm pretty sure if you asked the average third grader whether it's ethically sound to use a dead artist's voice in your rap beef, they would probably say no, even with their limited knowledge of what those words mean. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not a genius or a philosopher for saying any of this. I'm a loser with an internet connection and access to social media. People everywhere are panicking and losing their minds just as much as I am. But simultaneously, I'm not standing here for no reason saying shit we all already know. There is an equally large group of people out there on social media right now who are celebrating every single one of AI's advancements, just looking forward to a day where they can fill their ears with all the perfectly curated sounds. But seriously, to any of you out there who feel that way, how badly do you need to be the musician here? Is being able to listen to any song at any time with instant access to new releases not good enough? Do you also need to go around to everyone you know saying you're a musician now because AI gave you the cheat code to do so? And before all you reasonable viewers start to think I'm being too harsh, this kind of thinking has only been enabled by even more of these AI music websites. I'm telling you, there is an endless supply of them. Almost all of the platforms that we've talked about thus far have some sort of capability to either monetize your music or send that shit right to Spotify, Apple Music, or SoundCloud, where you can get rinsed by the laughable revenue splits. Now, we could go through and clown on these platforms for their lackluster music-making capabilities, but I think you already get the idea of just how bad of an investment these platforms are, either with your money or time. Instead, I want to run you guys through the mindset that these companies expect you to have in order to use these platforms effectively. So to start, you do need to have some drive to be a musical artist. These websites have tried to further this by playing into people's ego a little bit, or in the worst of cases, people's narcissism and sense of entitlement. Because let's be very clear, just like how we talked about with AWS Deep Composer, there are numerous better ways to learn to make music, none of which at any point involve giving money to an AI startup. And they know this. Their target demographic is not people who have humble and genuine intentions of making art. It is rather individuals who feel they deserve a creative career, mostly for the benefit of attention and money. This is why websites like Boomy advertise their service as a monetizable way to make AI music. The music isn't a selling point at all, it's making a career out of it. So once you decide you have the drive to be a musician, but you strip away all genuine desire to put in effort, you just pick a service and sign up. You're then supposed to look at these pricing screens and think, oh yeah, I want to spend $30 a month on a music career which is fundamentally based on unoriginal ideas. Because everything has to be a subscription, obviously. They then expect you, knowing you're paying $30 to $50 a month on this service, to see the literal pennies you're receiving from Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube combined, and continue to tell yourself you're learning how to make music and crafting some ideal artist image. All the while, you're still making music just as uninspired and robotic as the day you started. You know that one clip of Lil Yachty and Nick Mira where Yachty is just humming things and Mira is just making them happen and they cook up a sick-ass track? This is pretty much that, except instead of humming any actual music, you're just barking adjectives at Nick Mira. Oh, and Nick Mira is in a coma next to you, and his coma-induced spasms are accidentally controlling FL Studio. Sick career, dude. These platforms are a dangerous level of tone deafness and being out of touch. But just like with Deep Composer, I'm the loser here. I'm objectively wrong. People have bought these services and will probably continue to as the technology gets farther and farther away from laughably bad. And not to mention that good old human laziness isn't really going anywhere. They're preying on those who, for whatever reason, innocently or not, think there's an easy way out when it comes to making music. But through the process of looking at these AI music dilemmas, we've realized that just isn't possible. We know that the best use case for AI is as a tool and not as a replacement for human creativity. Yes, it may take years, decades even, to capitalize on that creativity, and it might not be you who does it, but music as a whole will end up better on the other end because of that time in the oven. We also decided that no, AI cannot truly be creative, both in practice thus far and fundamentally. The whole concept of basing newly generated music off of other music that already exists is contradictory to the very definition of creativity. But we also realized that, goddamn, humans really are lazy. Trying to skip the dedication to learning, the trial and error, working through frustration, and seeking out new knowledge just isn't a realistic thing. Maybe needing AI to make you a musician is a good sign that you aren't meant to be one, but maybe that just sounds harsh. I don't know. Just Just imagine a world where everyone is walking around as a music artist with songs on every major streaming platform. Going on to any of those platforms would be like scrolling through the TikTok live section. There would be absolutely no use in going out of your way to find new music. These platforms would just be drowning in robotic sludge. So I will ask again, how badly do you need to be a musician? I would argue that if you want to involve yourself with music that badly, but you don't want to put in the blood, sweat, or tears required, it's probably better to just enjoy other humans' music before it's too late. So, in the battle that is humans versus AI in the music industry, we're getting our absolute asses kicked. So hard. Who knew humans, as a race, could lose to another intelligence? Top of the food chain, my ass. So why don't we just look forward into the future instead? The present sucks. It's my least favorite ghost in A Christmas Carol anyway. Let's forget about it. What does a world where AI makes all the music even look like? Beyond just theorizing about how that could happen, because frankly, I'm not smart enough, what happens to the rest of us who don't own the code and sit on a massive tech giant corporation throne? The biggest and most obvious consequence is the one that I've said in 40 different ways already. New music would be boring. Based on everything we know about AI right now, and even in the conceivable future, it can't come up with new ideas. So it's reasonable to conclude that by the same token, old music would behave much differently. Music that we would probably count out as being too of the time would dramatically rise in value, so to speak. Let me give an example. My favorite 80s song, Your Love by The Outfield. Many of you who lived through the 80s and 90s probably either hate this song or have a distant nostalgia for it, and that's because it's a quintessential 80s song. It was played on the radio pretty much 24/7, and especially in a world where quirky and identifiable music is at our fingertips all the time, it's not really a surprise people have that kind of relationship with this song. They don't really see a need to revisit it. But AI would undoubtedly drown the market in songs that are replicating a variety of different eras that would all probably sound boring and soulless. And in that case, a song like Your Love would become an even more valuable time capsule. In fact, this same phenomenon is already happening. People cherishing physical releases of music, most notably LPs or vinyl records, is partially out of fear that one day these old relics of musical past are going to be long forgotten in favor of whatever comes after streaming platforms, which hold your music on the nebulous internet. And AI could be that thing that comes after Spotify, which makes all that old, sloppily recorded, expensive music obsolete. We could just generate new 80s music. But wait, that scenario assumes a pretty massive change. In a future where AI has completely taken over the music industry, are human artists entirely gone? It's honestly really hard to say, because the technology that already exists could hypothetically phase out an artist being behind the music altogether, but it will probably always be advantageous for the labels to put a face in front of the songs, even just for relatability. However, it's not really those big-name pop stars we're actually concerned about, and definitely not the labels. It's the next Nick Drake, or George Clinton, or Earl Sweatshirt, the one or two people in a bedroom that are coming up with highly personal, innovative, and maybe not as advertised projects. In that world where our feeds would be drowning in eye-catching and electric spectacles of music, I struggle to believe those humble and smaller turned cult-followed artists would keep their heads above water. Not to mention, AI music has already been a copyright and legislative nightmare. I've avoided talking about those details mostly because I find them really boring, but an important question is brought up from those issues existing. What exactly is stopping some nefarious AI-controlling fame addict from stealing that humble artist's likeness and making their own music? Which, yeah, you're right, might be taken down, but I found Heart on My Sleeve, didn't I? And you all recognized it when I brought it up, at least for its significance. So, sure, labels might adapt by putting a new face in front of AI music to keep human artists alive that way. But there's a reason that these huge pop stars are seemingly replicated with relative ease. To these big labels, your music and you are replaceable. But hold on, wait a minute. Who needs labels when everything's made by a single robot? What happens when there are no artists to sign? Or the artists that do exist are the robots? They don't need money. And this is another time where I have to warn you, I don't mean to scare you all, but this kind of thing already exists and has been replicated. Anna Indiana, better known for this picture, is an AI singer-songwriter. I mean, there's really not much else to say. I mean, that is like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And god damn it, it's promoting one of these AI music websites. Or Nunori, another AI artist who was just signed to Warner Music Group. So I was wrong. Labels will stick around? Well, assuming they this isn't a massive publicity stunt, even though I really wish it was, it could be them testing the waters to see if they don't even need a human to be the frontman for the music. Fuck it, maybe people will just be okay with seeing this shittily animated Bratz doll do interviews and release music. Needless to say, this little thought exercise of looking into what the future might hold, it kind of sealed the deal. AI racked up a lot of points. It's looking like that AI takeover of the music industry is a little closer than I initially thought. So, shit, man. I started this video with the vigor and passion of a small puppy. I really spent the last 2 months trying to collect data and evidence to take down AI music, but here I am, however many minutes into this video, telling you I give up. I give up. Listen, guys, face it, we got our asses kicked out there. It's like the scene from Space Jam, and we're the goddamn Looney Tunes. Frankly, no matter how much we scream and kick our feet, Elon is taking our music away. We're fighting a losing battle, and I'm sorry. But hold on, wait a second. It would be so irresponsible of me to conclude on a note as bleak as that. It would be, frankly, a disservice to the people out there currently making music, listening to music, or shit, thinking about music. We as a race, as a group of individuals, may be losing the battle to computers on multiple fronts. It may have proven to be able to match us in areas of music composition and creation that we didn't even think were possible. It may have convinced us that the future is as hopeless as it gets. But there is something that a computer, a robot, a few lines of code, a plastic, fake, artificial replica of human intelligence could never even graze the surface of. And that is the unexpected. Creativity is a word which is often paired with collaboration, and for good reason. When the human imagination is able to condense itself into one piece of art, it transcends museum fodder and becomes an extension of the artist. And when two of these independent, possibly drastically different extensions meet and form one piece of creative work, an unexplainable, deeply instinctual feeling is spawned. The combination of two things as trivial and as humorously opposed as trap music and classical performers can become something much greater than a piece of entertainment. It can represent the culmination of two different webs of thousands of different thoughts, emotions, and actions into one unified entity. And there is nothing any algorithm can do to even approach that kind of raw human nature. I'll say this. It may seem right now as if there's literally no point in caring about music to any degree, but do not stop making music. Do not give up on finding your next favorite artist, because when it really does matter, that art will mean so much more to anyone involved in the making or hearing of it than any combination of zeros and ones that call itself music will ever mean to anyone. I think that's all I gotta say. Take care. I'll see you all soon.
I was broke, now I'm rich, these niggas. Yeah, I've been waking up to get the money, whoa, whoa. Got a bad bitch ass tatted, whoa, whoa.